Hey garden friends, welcome to today's adventure in my little green paradise. In this video we're diving straight into my backyard garden and picking some really cool vegetables to make a meal that's gonna steal the show. We're gonna start with the incredible patty pan squash, which is gonna take center stage in a vegetable ravioli and cream sauce. It's my husband's personal favorite. Now let's start by harvesting the star of the show, the patty pan squash, also known as a scallop squash. You can see it here. I have a few female flowers, but I actually have one that is ready to harvest now, so we're gonna go ahead and take that little guy. I just love their shape. I think they're so cute, but the cool thing about the shape is that they are more firm and have less seeds when you cook them, which is really cool. We're also going to be taking some of the cubanella peppers that I have here. They're the first ones that have been ready. I do have other kinds, some bell peppers, some paprika, some pimento, all kinds of cool stuff, but the cubanellas just really shine in my garden. They just do really well, and they're kind of like a bell pepper in taste, maybe not quite as sweet. And then of course, if you remember from my previous videos, we did harvest some garlic, and we're going to be using that in today's recipe as well. And then we have some tomatoes that are just starting to blush. I left these on the counter for a couple days so that that blush could redden up some more. We also have, besides this larger one, which is a Neptune, we also have my favorite. They aren't pretty, but they're a great tomato, which is a pear tomato, and they produce really well in the garden. Something cool happened. I was so excited. In my P.O. box, a friend of the channel, Monica, sent me some plants. She sent me some taro root cuttings, as well as, I don't know if I'm going to phrase this correctly, some of them are cuttings from the plants that have rooted, and others are, I believe, like the sprouts that have occurred off of the root of the taro, which is, I think it's taro. They're very much like potatoes, but they grow really, really well down here. They do have to be cooked, from what I understand. I don't know a lot about this plant. It was something that I have wanted to grow for a really long time, and she offered to send some to me. So thank you so much, Monica. I am so excited about these plants, and she did an amazing job shipping these, far better than probably anyone that I've purchased from. She had them wrapped so nicely. The roots were just so healthy. The greens were still on the plants, which was really cool. It was awesome. So what I did was, I decided that for the cuttings, I'm just going to put them in these 5-inch pots for the moment. I have to figure out where I'm going to place them, if I'm going to use them as ornamentals to begin with, and just use the rooted, the sprout roots that she sent me for the actual food crop. I'm not 100% sure yet, but so I decided to put the cuttings in these little pots for the time being, and I'll move them to another pot later. But the actual ones that have rooted from the root, I'm going to place those in the ground because I do think that they're going to do better. I'm placing them at the end of one of my flower beds that I recently put in, and I think they're going to do better here in terms of producing the food crop. So that's why I'm taking different approaches here. And all that I did, just like with anything else, is I just buried the root piece just like you would a potato. It's kind of like a mix between a white potato and a sweet potato in terms of like how you bury it. So I did some research. Hopefully that works. Before we head in, there's just one more task I need to do, which I need to collect my broccoli and my greens. And yes, I cannot believe it, I'm actually harvesting broccoli right now. It's pretty crazy to me. These are a sprouting broccoli. They're meant for warmer climates. I didn't intend to grow them for the broccoli part, the head part. And as you can see, that those were quite small. They're sprouting broccoli, so they're a lot more like broccolini. What I'm really harvesting and keeping this plant for was the greens. I didn't grow collards or the type of kale I like. I like dinosaur kale for my greens for the year. I didn't grow them this year. I don't know what I was thinking, but I forgot. So I thought, you know what, let me start some sprouting broccoli pretty late. I know that it'll grow in the heat, and then I can use the leaves and greens to preserve them, and I'm going to preserve them by freezing them for summer, so that way I have some greens to cook with. I also did this with the karobi that I've been harvesting. Those are almost out, so this is the time when I'm collecting all those greens. And the only thing you have to do is first clean them, because because they're kind of out of season right now, they do tend to get aphids and lots of other stuff. So clean them really well. And so I've done that. I soaked them for probably about 30-45 minutes. Then I ran them through my salad spinner, and then I'm going to blanch them. And the reason why you're doing this is because they're going to hold up better to the freezing process. Some vegetables just do better by putting them in some boiling hot water for a couple minutes, and then you're going to move them to cold water very quickly. I have tried just putting them in the freezer without doing this step, and it gets weird. I don't know how to explain it other than to say that it doesn't hold its shape and it doesn't hold its texture. And I'm really a texture person. So by blanching them, you can see here I'm putting them in the cold water. By blanching them, I am cooking them for just a brief second. Thankfully, broccoli and kohlrabi are kind of hardy greens. They're not like spinach where they just wilt down in a second. They hold up their shape, which is one of the reasons why I like to use them for this purpose rather than something like a spinach. And then once I've wrung them out and dried them a little bit, I'm going to put them on a tray, and then that tray, I'm taking it out to my outside garage fridge, and I'm going to stick it in the freezer for a couple hours. And this is called flash freezing. I'm doing this because I want them to be able to separate. I don't want them into one giant clump when I put them in the bag. So by flash freezing them like this, you can see I can kind of crumble them up, and then when I take them out of the bag later, maybe not so obvious now, but later when I cook with them throughout the summer, they won't be this huge clump of just green material. They are going to break up into pieces, which is exactly what I like to do. Is I like to take them out handfuls at a time and throw them into a skillet, and that's what I cook with. That's our greens for the entire summer until we're back into fall and winter and I can grow more greens fresh. Now we're on to the best part of the video, which is the food. The food. Guys, I love food. And it's probably why I love gardening, right? Because I just love food. I've always loved cooking. Patty pan squash was something that I didn't even know existed until I got into gardening. So I like zucchini. I just don't like how it gets kind of wilty and kind of soft. But patty pan squash has so few seeds in it that it holds up so much better. This is the garlic. If you remember from my garlic harvest video, there were some that were quite small, so I froze them in oil. That's what that is. It's just a little ice cube of oil and garlic. And then I freeze my onions and my peppers. Those were the cubanellas from earlier. I chop them up and I freeze them immediately upon coming in from outside, so that way they hold their flavor and their texture. You don't have to blanch those. You can just throw those in the freezer. I do have a few tomatoes that have been on the counter from our last big rain. I pulled my tomatoes off because if you don't, they will split and then they rot and then you lose tomatoes. So a lot of the times as a preventative, I will go out there after a big rain and I will pull off any of the tomatoes that look like they are moving from the dark green stage to the light green stage. And then you can see I just put them in a bowl on the counter until they turn red. And that's what I'm cooking with today, is the ones from probably a month ago. They take a long time to turn red. That's one downside. But the good side is that means that you have tomatoes for a lot longer of a period. So now we got our veggies all chopped up. We're going to put some water into a bowl, and I am going to use these raviolis that I like. They are I think it's a spinach and ricotta ravioli. One day I do hope to make my own tortellinis and raviolis rather than buying them. But for now, I'm using the bagged stuff. Now we're going to start by sauteing the onions and the peppers. I'm going to hold off on the garlic for the minute because garlic does burn quite easily. So I always kind of put it in right at the end, like the last 30 seconds. Because these peppers are frozen and the onions are frozen as well, they're going to take a minute and they're going to release some water. So I am really cooking them at a super high temperature so that way they don't just boil in there. After they've cooked for a couple minutes, then I'm going to take my patty pan squash and I'm going to lay each piece on its side on the other half of the pan. I'm not salt and peppering these yet. You'll notice that. There's a reason for that. Is zucchini is very watery. So if you were to salt and pepper them now, they would push out all their water from the salt and they would get mushy. So I don't salt and pepper them until the very end. While those are cooking, we're gonna put our pasta in the water. It's only gonna take like maybe 5 minutes for those in simmering water. Now we're gonna hop back to the veggies and we're gonna flip over each one of the patty pan squash pieces so that the other side can darken. Once again, this is on a really high heat because I really wanna add color to the veggies, including that squash, but I don't want to cook them to the point that they're like super soft. I want all of the veggies to still have a crunch to them. So high heat for short periods of time will do that. Now I'm gonna add that little frozen olive oil and garlic, and then we're going to throw those tomatoes right on top and let everything kind of meld together, and for that ice cube of olive oil and garlic to go ahead and melt. Now we're headed towards the end, so now is when we're going to salt and pepper them. And the only season other than salt and pepper that I'm adding here is actually onion powder. These are onions that I dehydrated last year. And then also my Italian seasoning blend, which is from all the herbs like parsley, oregano, thyme. I kind of mix pretty much all my green herbs into this, basil, all that. I'm adding a little bit of water, and this is like a bouillon flavor sauce. I could have added some of my home canned bone broth, but I don't have any right now. I need to make some more, so I'm just using the bottled stuff. Then I'm adding about 1/4 cup of sour cream. You could also use cream cheese. If you don't have sour cream or cream cheese, you can just go with a milk or a cream or half and half. I'm very much into use whatever you have, so I always have sour cream. Then we're adding some Parmesan cheese. If you don't have Parmesan cheese, go for another type of white cheese. Gouda is great. Mozzarella is perfect. All of those would work. Anything that melts well. We've drained our pasta, and now we're just going to put that pasta right on top. This cool thing, you know, most everything is done other than the boiling of the pasta in one pot, which is nice. It's a lot less dishes to manage. And then I'm just going to mix them in gently. The pasta will break if you're not careful, so just kind of be gentle as you toss it around in the sauce. If your sauce is too thick and it hasn't thinned out, just keep adding a little bit of broth or water until you get to that proper consistency. And this is going to be our dinner for the night, so I'm spooning out for my husband, Jason's plate, as well as my own. We are a really big fan of this recipe, and one of the biggest reasons why I absolutely love this recipe is because you don't have to use zucchini, you don't have to use onions, you don't have to use tomatoes. You could use whatever you have. I've done it with broccoli, I've done it with green beans, peas, all kinds of stuff. It's amazing every time. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you want to watch more of my videos between now and my next upload, I'm going to put those up now. Happy gardening and happy cooking, guys.